Imagine holding a full glass bottle on your head.
Okay.
You're balancing it there while you do a one-handed push-up. And at the exact same time, your hips and your shoulders are just violently twisting in completely opposite directions.
That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. And you're doing all of this at lightning speed, reacting in real time to a drum beat that you can't even predict.
Wow.
You might think this is like some kind of elite Olympic training drill or maybe a modern neurological test. But in late 19th century Cuba, this was just a Tuesday night in a crowded courtyard.
That is just, I mean, it sounds almost physically impossible when you lay it out like that. We are so conditioned to think that breakthroughs in, human performance or advanced neuroscience, they only happen in these sterile white laboratories.
Right, with athletes covered in all those motion capture sensors.
Exactly. We expect sports science to look highly engineered.
Yeah. But the document we're diving into today completely shatters that assumption. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, our mission is to unpack a really fascinating analysis from Kinexa formation.
Authored by Dr. Christophe Delong. Right?
Exactly. It's titled La Rumba Cubaine. And through this research, we're going to explore how a dance that was born in the absolute margins of society is essentially this undiscovered manual for advanced human biomechanics.
And brain plasticity, too. It's wild. It requires us to look at this living, breathing, historical tradition, but through the very specific lens of modern sports medicine.
Because, I mean, if you're picturing rumba as that slow, heavily sequenced ballroom dance from, like, TV competitions.
Oh, well, yeah, you have to throw that image out the window immediately.
Right.
The original Cuban rumba, at least as Dr. Delong and Kinexa analyze it, is this explosive blend of Afro-Cuban resistance, elite athleticism, and a deeply immersive cultural survival system.
Yeah, and to really understand the science of the movement, we first have to look at the environment that actually forged it. So if this didn't come from a polished European ballroom, what kind of environment was volatile enough to produce this?
Well, you have to picture the solares of late 19th century Cuba.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is a solar?
So they were these collected housing courtyards. Basically, after the abolition of slavery, you had a massive population of African descendants crammed into these urban spaces, living right alongside poor Spanish immigrants.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about heavy manual labor in the ports and sugar plantations, extreme overcrowding, and just really intense social marginalization.
So it's this forced melting pot. You've got polyrhythmic African traditions physically colliding with Spanish colonial language, Catholic structures, European social hierarchies.
Exactly. And in that kind of crucible, movement isn't just a fun weekend activity, It is engineered as a bold assertion of identity.
A way to claim space.
Right. And that historical friction gave birth to 3 distinct dramaturgies or styles of rumba. The source breaks them down by their completely different social logics.
Let's go through them.
Sure. So the oldest one, which is also the slowest, is called the yambu.
Okay, the yambu. Now, the document mentions the yambu actually mimics the movements of the elderly, which, is that like a parody? What's the purpose there?
No, not at all. It's actually this deep sign of respect. It's a meditation on dignity. Because the dancers are imitating older folks, they use a drastically reduced range of motion and a very low center of gravity. There's an intense economy of movement. The male dancer adopts this protective, gallant posture, while the female dancer emphasizes the grace of her shoulders and arms.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But the defining rule of yambu is that physical contact is strictly forbidden. It is pure, contained sensuality.
Wow, so there's a really strict boundary there.
Yeah.
But that boundary gets completely obliterated when we look at the second style, right? The guaguancó.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this seems to be the most popular version. And from the descriptions, it reads less like a dance and more like a high-speed strategic martial art. It's like a physical high-speed chess match of gender dynamics.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. If yambu is about restraint, guaguancó is an outright physical duet of evasion and pursuit, and it centers entirely around a movement called the vacunao.
Right. I wanted to ask about the vacunao because Dr. Delong's paper focuses on it a lot. It translates roughly to vaccination, right?
Yes. And it's a sharp, ritualized, symbolic gesture of possession.
Okay.
The man plays the role of the aggressor, or the vaccinator. His movements are jagged, they're unpredictable. He is constantly scanning for an opening to execute this sudden flick of the hand or a thrust of the pelvis directed toward the woman.
But the woman isn't passive in this at all. Like, she isn't just waiting to be tagged, right?
Oh, definitely not. She is the protector. She actively defends against this symbolic strike using what's called the botao.
The botao.
Yeah, which is a rapid, sweeping block using her hands or her skirts. She maintains a deeply rooted stance, and she keeps her movements fluid and circular to basically deflect his angular attacks.
Like a theater of power.
Yes. You have his virility and unpredictability clashing against her spatial control and mastery of self.
So if guaguancó is this intense duet of evasion, what happens when you remove the partner entirely? Does the biomechanical demand drop, or does it shift into something else?
It shifts into something far more dangerous, which brings us to the third style, the Colombia.
Okay, the Colombia.
This was traditionally a solo male dance born out in the rural sugar plantations. So without a partner to interact with, the focus turns purely to bravado and acrobatic survival.
Oh, wow.
This is where you see the pasos de force, those ultra-fast, aggressive footwork patterns. The dancer incorporates literal acrobatics.
Right, the leaps and one-handed push-ups.
Yes, and as you mentioned in the intro, balancing knives or full bottles of rum on their heads while moving at breakneck speed.
Which is just, it's insane. And this is exactly where the Kinexa formation analysis gets so fascinating. Because Dr. Delong steps in here and just strips away the music, the history, the costumes, and looks purely at the kinesiology.
Right.
And he notes that despite how different these three styles look, they all share what he calls a universal posture.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that across all rumba, the dancer's torso is permanently tilted forward and the knees are deeply and continuously bent.
But wait, from a purely physiological standpoint, maintaining a forward-leaning squat for like 10 or 15 minutes, that sounds like a recipe for destroying your lower back. How are they not collapsing in pain?
Well, they would be if they were relying on their superficial muscles. But this posture is a massive isometric challenge for the deep core, specifically the transverse abdominis and the multifidus.
Okay, let's break those down, because those are pretty heavy anatomical terms for us non-doctors.
Sure. Think of the transverse abdominis like your body's natural internal weightlifting belt.
Okay, a weightlifting belt.
Exactly. It wraps entirely around your midsection. And the multifidus are these tiny, deeply embedded muscles that essentially interlock with your spine.
So they aren't the muscles you use for doing crunches.
No, you use them to stop your spine from shearing apart when your body is under intense stress. By engaging these deep muscles, the dancer locks their lumbar spine into a safe position, and that deep knee bend dramatically lowers their center of gravity, which reduces the lever arm.
Meaning they are incredibly hard to knock over.
Exactly. They are loading their legs like coiled springs, which allows for instantaneous, explosive changes of direction without losing balance.
And they need that rock-solid base because what the top half of the body is doing, right?
Yeah.
The Kinexa report spends a lot of time on axial dissociation.
Yes. This is arguably the most sophisticated physical element of the rumba. Axial dissociation means your hips and your shoulders have to move completely independently of one another.
I mean, if you're listening to this right now, try sitting up straight and sharply twisting your hips to the left, but keep your shoulders completely frozen. It feels incredibly awkward, right?
Oh, it really does.
Your body naturally wants your shoulders to follow your hips.
Yeah, it's basic physics. When a dancer generates massive, fast-twitch rotational force with their hips to the left, they are creating kinetic energy. If the upper body just went along for the ride, that kinetic force would spin them right off their feet.
Oh, so they literally spin out of control.
Right. So, to prevent falling over, the shoulders must execute an instantaneous counter-rotation to the right. The top half and the bottom half of the human body are functioning as two distinct counterbalancing engines.
That's wild.
The hips generate the power, and the shoulders cancel out the rotational momentum to keep the dancer perfectly centered.
Okay, physically that makes sense as a counterbalance, but neurologically, how is a person doing that consciously while also balancing a bottle on their head?
Well, they aren't doing it consciously.
They aren't?
No, if you tried to consciously think, okay, hips left, shoulders right, block with the hand, the moment would be over before your nervous system could even send the signal. Dr. Delong highlights that this is a real-time, ultra-fast auditory motor reflex loop.
Okay, I want to push back a bit on how we normally think about dance here. Usually there's a beat, and the dancer follows the music, right? The music leads, the body follows. But in the Colombia style, the sources describe a dynamic where the dancer actually challenges the music.
That is a crucial distinction. In Colombia, the dancer interacts directly with the quinto, which is the high-pitched lead solo drum.
Okay.
It is an intellectual and physical jousting match. The dancer might execute a sudden shoulder drop or a rapid, stuttering step, And the drummer has to instantly catch that movement with a sharp crack on the drum.
Wait, really? So the drummer is following the dancer?
It goes both ways. It's a continuous microscopic feedback loop. And biologically, this requires an overwhelming amount of brain power.
I can imagine.
First, you have the cerebellum, which acts as the brain's ultra-precise internal clock, processing the timing of the rhythm down to the millisecond. Then you have the basal ganglia.
And the basal ganglia's job is what, exactly?
It initiates fluid, spontaneous movement. It's the part of the brain that allows you to shift from standing still into an explosive leap without having to consciously plan the muscle contractions.
Okay, so it's the trigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to physically execute these sudden microscopic adjustments, the dancer relies almost entirely on type I muscle fibers.
Those are the fast twitch fibers, right?
Yes. Think of the difference between a marathon runner and an Olympic sprinter. A marathon runner uses slow twitch fibers for endurance. Type I fibers are what a sprinter uses to explode off the starting blocks.
Got it.
The rumba dancer is firing these explosive fibers over and over again to make rapid micro-adjustments based on what the drum is doing, or, crucially, what the drummer isn't doing.
How does the brain process this complex rhythm without the body simply tripping over itself in the process? Because that sounds incredibly chaotic. To keep the brain from just short-circuiting under that load, there has to be some kind of underlying architecture holding it all together.
And there is. Everything we just talked about, the deep core engagement, the axial dissociation, the auditory reflex, is completely anchored to one strict musical engine, the cleve.
The clepio, which, I mean, they are just two simple wooden sticks, but Dr. Delong refers to them as the spiritual and technical metronome of the rumba.
Yes, they are the master clock of the entire ecosystem. The cleve plays a repeating asymmetrical cycle, usually a 2-3 or a 3-2 syncopated pattern.
Okay.
Every single physiological movement of the dancer's body is mapped onto the tension and release of that specific pattern.
But what happens if the musicians mess up? Like, the report mentions a state called cruza, where the clevis shifts off beat. Does the dance just look a little sloppy?
No, it's far more severe than that. If the cleve goes into cruza, the entire biomechanical structure literally collapses. The dancers physically cannot execute their movements.
Wait, why? Why can't they just keep dancing to the other drums?
Because the brain is a predictive machine. The dancer's cerebellum is preloading the motor cortex, essentially saying, the next beat is coming in 3 milliseconds. Fire the fast twitch fibers in the hip now.
Oh, wow.
If that beat doesn't arrive exactly when the brain expects it, the neurological signal misfires. The kinetic chain locks up. It's like pulling the spark plugs out of an engine while it's running at top speed. The body simply refuses to execute the mechanics.
That is mind-blowing. It perfectly illustrates how tightly the brain, the body, and the sound are fused together.
Totally.
And that fusion scales upward into the actual structure of the rumba event itself. It begins with the Diana, right?
Right.
Which is this melodic, wordless vocal introduction.
Yes, the singer is setting the tone and establishing the pitch.
Right. And then what?
Then comes the inspiration. That's the narrative phase where the soloist sings the verses and tells the story of the community. But the physical eruption, where the biomechanics we just discussed are fully unleashed, happens in the final phase, the montuno.
Right. The montuno is the call and response part.
Yeah.
The soloist sings a line, the entire community answers as a chorus, the percussion hits maximum intensity, and the dancers step into the center.
It's the peak of the event.
Exactly. And looking at the that courtyard we talked about at the beginning, the structure of this circle is really profound. It operates like a living battery.
A living battery? How do you mean?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Inside that circle, everyone is a component of the circuit.
Yeah.
You're either singing, playing an instrument, or dancing.
There are no passive observers.
Right, there is no audience. And because the physical demands of the guaguanco or Colombia are so extreme, an individual dancer can only sustain it for a few minutes.
Makes sense given the fast twitch fibers.
Exactly. So the moment they are exhausted, another dancer swaps in with just a simple nod or gesture. It's like an endurance tag team match. The individual rests, but the energy of the circuit is never broken.
I love that analogy. And that living battery doesn't stay confined to the courtyard either. During festivals, that microsociety expands fractally into the streets.
Right, it grows.
The stationary circle mutates into a moving procession. You get comparses, these massive organized neighborhood groups, and conga lines. We aren't just talking about a few wooden sticks anymore.
Now we're talking about dozens of heavy drums and iron bells, creating literal acoustic shockwaves.
Yes. It unifies thousands of people into a synchronized state of collective movement.
It's just an incredibly resilient survival mechanism. It provided a social glue and a physical release valve for a deeply oppressed population. And because it was so potent, it couldn't be contained. It expanded across the globe, mutating wildly depending on who adopted it.
It really did.
The documents outline the four phases of rumba. Let's talk about the first major global leap.
Oh, this is a phenomenal sociological study in reclamation. So in the 1940s and 50s, a series of Cuban Rumba records, known as the GV series, made their way across the Atlantic and reached the Congo Basin in Central Africa.
Wait, really? So the descendants of the people who were stolen from Africa created this music in Cuba, and then decades later, those records find their way back to the continent.
Precisely. And local African musicians heard these records and instantly recognized the polyrhythmic DNA. Artists like Franco Luambo and Gran Calle took those Cuban rhythms and essentially said, this is ours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they re-injected it into their own culture, added electric guitars, and slowed the tempo to make it more languorous. This birthed Congolese rumba, which eventually became the dominant musical genre across the entire African continent.
That is a beautiful full-circle moment of cultural reclamation.
Right.
But then rumba also travels to Europe and the United States, and we get the ballroom rumba.
Right.
And reading through the source material, the irony here is almost painful. So what does this all mean for the original dance?
It is a stark contrast. The ballroom dance industry took this explosive improvisational survival tool and heavily codified it into a sterile, regulated, competitive sport. They drastically reduced the speed down to a very slow 24 to 27 measures per minute.
And they stripped out the percussive engine completely. They removed the quintentrom, the improvised jousting, the complex axial dissociation.
All of it.
The version of rumba taught in elite global dance studios today is almost entirely disconnected from the raw, resistant mechanism Dr. Delong describes. It's like a completely different species of movement.
It highlights the tension between preserving a culture and commercializing it, for sure. Though, to be fair to its adaptability, we also see the Mediterranean mutation, or gypsy rumba.
Oh, right, with the guitars.
Yeah. In the south of France and Spain, groups like the Gypsy Kings fused the Cuban rhythm with Spanish flamenco guitars and intense hand claps, known as palmas. It morphed to fit the emotional needs of a different marginalized group.
But let's bring this incredible global journey back to the individual human body. Because Kinexa formation and Dr. Delong aren't just giving us a history lesson or a cultural critique here.
No, they definitely aren't.
The ultimate thesis of this document is that this specific dance holds highly concrete, therapeutic avenues for modern medicine.
This is where the synthesis of history and science truly pays off. How can this past heal our future? Kinexa's analysis concludes that the intense biomechanical demands of traditional Cuban rumba can be reverse-engineered for functional rehabilitation.
Let's walk through what that actually looks like.
Yeah.
Imagine a patient who has suffered a severe spinal injury, or perhaps someone recovering from a stroke where their kinetic chain, the way their muscles fire in sequence, has been fundamentally broken. How does rumba actually help them?
Well, if you put that patient into a traditional static physical therapy environment, progress can be incredibly slow. But if you apply the principles of a guaguancó dancer, you change the paradigm entirely. You train the patient to engage that deep core, the multifidus, while practicing axial dissociation. By forcing them to decouple the movement of their hips from their shoulders, you are essentially forcing the nervous system to rewrite the software of how they balance and move.
And it goes beyond just strengthening the muscles, right? It impacts the brain itself. We talked earlier about how the brain is a predictive machine when listening to the clave. How does that auditory reflex help a stroke patient?
When a patient suffers a stroke, certain neural pathways in the brain are essentially blocked or destroyed. The brain needs to build new roads to send signals to the limbs. This is called neuroplasticity.
Right.
We know from neurological studies that complex polyrhythmic auditory stimulus like the asymmetrical tension of the clave acts as a powerful blueprint for the brain.
So by anchoring their physical therapy to that specific rhythm, the rhythm actually helps the brain bypass the damaged areas.
Exactly that. It is similar to how patients with Parkinson's disease, whose basal ganglia are compromised, can sometimes walk fluidly if a rhythmic beat is played. The auditory cortex essentially takes over the job of initiating movement.
That is incredible.
By using the deeply embedded polyrhythmic architecture of the rumba, therapists can provide the brain with a robust framework to rebuild those lost neural pathways. You are driving genuine brain healing through sound and complex movement.
You are taking the literal survivalist heartbeat of a 19th century marginalized community, and you're using it to rebuild the nervous system of a 21st century patient.
It's profoundly moving when you think about it.
It really is, and when you fully grasp the depth of that, it makes complete sense why this entire living system, the music, the social structure of the solar, the biomechanics, was officially recognized as a UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity in 2016.
It is much more than folklore. It is a masterpiece of human resilience and biocultural engineering that has stood the test of time.
It completely changes how you look at human movement. We started this deep dive talking about those sterile, white athletic laboratories and how we assume that's the only place we can find the secrets to elite human performance and healing.
Yeah, that bias is so strong.
But Dr. Delong and Kinexa formation leave us with a very different perspective today. So for everyone listening, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If a 19th century dance, born in the dusty courtyards of a heavily oppressed population, contains such sophisticated biomechanical and neurological healing properties, what other marginalized cultural traditions around the world are secretly holding the keys to advanced physical therapy and cognitive rehabilitation, just waiting for us to actually pay attention?